Hi. Well, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia this evening. You can see a little bit over my shoulder the skyline of the beauty of the Deep South in the evening. I stuffed myself early in the evening with good Southern cooking, and so now I came up here to chat with you a bit. Maybe a little loud. If it gets too loud, I might have to get up really, really early in the morning and finish up. Since I'm at a conference with a bunch of other professors from around the United States, so you get a bunch of geeks in a hotel, then sometimes it gets a bit loud. So we'll proceed though. I'm talking about the prophets tonight. Isaiah is the first prophet, probably the most popular prophet. Most people who've never even heard much about Christianity still know about the book of Isaiah, primarily because of Handel's Messiah for the most part. The outline of the book kind of carries us through. You've got this immediate and impending judgment on Israel, really echoed in chapter 7, where you've got Israel being threatened, or Judah rather, the southern kingdom of Judah being threatened by both the northern kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of the kingdom of Damascus and Syria. Syria had been in the news recently. Damascus is capital. King Rezin of Damascus had joined with the king of the northern kingdom of Israel to come and attack the southern kingdom of Judah. Now, let me take a break real quick and just divide this up here. So Solomon's son, Rehoboam, comes to the throne, and through foolishness divides the kingdom. From that point forward, you've got a northern kingdom who's Israel, with the capital of Samaria, southern kingdom that's Judah, with the capital in Jerusalem. So now that you've got these two kingdoms, they're two kingdoms with completely different kings, completely different religious calendars, thanks to Jeroboam the first in the northern kingdom, and so completely different standing armies. And so what happens is conflict at points in time. Well, this is the 8th century in Isaiah's time, and in the 8th century, we're right in the throes of the northern and southern kingdom going at it. And the northern kingdom, maybe unbeknownst to it, is on its last leg, but the southern kingdom has still got some time to go till the 6th century. And so this is pre-exile prophecy. Most prophecies are rooted around the exile itself. Pre-exilic, exilic, post-exilic prophecies. Prophecies that are done before going into exile, before and slightly in exile, and then after exile, or during exile, slightly after the exile is over. And so that's the concept that how we designate these prophets. Now, Isaiah is 8th century pre-exilic prophecy, and so he is warning Judah. And in warning Judah, he warns them against going to Assyria to fight off the northern kingdom of Israel and Damascus as they come after them. Ahaz, of course, doesn't listen, and the immediate and impending judgment on the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah then begin. The northern kingdom a bit faster than the southern kingdom. The immediate and impending judgment then is echoed from chapters 13 through 35 against foreign nations. Typically, we call these oracles against the nations, OAN, oracles against the nations, and these oracles stand as an audacious word. Actually, this is the God of Israel acting as if He is also sovereign over the pantheons of all the gods that are around the surrounding area. So the notion of, for example, in Christianity, the Bible and historic Christianity is always maintained that Jesus is the only way at all in order for an individual human being to be right and be accepted by God due to his status. And that's an audacious idea. When I was an atheist, it was one of the ideas I hated the most about Christianity and couldn't get my head around the most about Christianity. However, it's a long history, start all the way back to really the Genesis account, but certainly back to the 8th century, where you've got these prophecies of this impending doom and judgment on the nations around Israel. For example, to understand how audacious it would have seemed to anyone back then, look around your house right now and glance at the walls. And each wall, consider each wall a geographical grid, and over each grid, consider that there's probably multiple, maybe even hundreds, depending on how big it is, of gods. Hundreds of gods ruling that grid. And so if one god crosses into another grid, then that's just war, as a general rule. And so the idea of one god sitting in one position and believing that he ruled over all the grids was really quite audacious, and would have been perceived to have been outlandish in some very real way, as it would be now by non-Christians. Listening to a Christian say that Jesus was the only conceivable way by which a sinner would be made righteous before God, it would be the same kind of thing, and so maybe even more so then than now, though, because of the deep religious ties that every single human being in every single culture had. So the idea is here, though, reflecting the ability of God to judge not just simply His people, but creation, but His people in particular will receive judgment. Now, in chapters 36 to 39, there's a narrative transition. We call it oftentimes the book of Hezekiah. And the book of Hezekiah is all about King Hezekiah, great king, two really great kings in the south, Hezekiah and Josiah. They both generated reforms. They did their best to push Judah back to a repentant lifestyle, and just simply could not, as a daylight and a dollar short for all practical purposes, as they came to the end of their rule. And so the narrative transitions kind of sits there to help make this shift that you find in the book of kind of doom and gloom and impending judgment to hope that in fact there will be an exile, but there is hope. And in hope, there's this business of new exodus. And this new exodus is driven by a figure, in particular Isaiah 42 through 53, that's typically called the suffering servant or the servant of the Lord. And the servant of the Lord is painted as if he's Israel in one body, Israel in a guy. Or if all of Israel were one guy. That's how the prophecies are kind of given out. And this suffering servant sacrifices himself on behalf of his people, most notably in Isaiah 53. If you're a Christian, or if you've got Christian friends, if you've ever gone to church with them, say on Easter, you've heard Isaiah 53 read. You should read that, just maybe stop my lecture right now and sit down and read that a bit. And just the first, say, 12 verses of Isaiah 53, really remarkable. He was wounded for our transgression, bruised for our iniquity. The chastisement that brought us peace was upon him. By his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray, and turned each one of us to his own way, but the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. It's a really moving text that talks about God, somehow or another, making sure that at the middle of creation, the middle of the cosmos of reality, there's this one individual that suffers for everyone. It's almost a cataclysmic sort of idea in some very real way. But this is the logic of the suffering servant, and all Israel would be saved through this servant. And Israel being, of course, those covenantally bound to God, maybe more so than genetically bound to God. And this would all be consistent with the restoration of Israel, which is painted in terms of new heaven and new earth, particularly in chapters 60 through 66. The next book in your English Bible is Jeremiah. And Jeremiah, as Isaiah ends with this great hope of new heaven and new earth, you get Jeremiah, who's just a mess. His nickname throughout time that I've ever known has been the Weeping Prophet, and he certainly sort of bears that out with not just simply the book of Jeremiah, but he also composes, at least the historical and the conventional perception is, he composes the book of Lamentations. Jeremiah provides an early sense of the prophecies during the reign of Josiah and Jehoiakim. Josiah and Jehoiakim are two key figures in Jeremiah's prophecy. Josiah being a king that is most famous for his radical reforms upon reading the Word of God. Jehoiakim, later on, his brother Jehoiakim, rather, very famous for carving up Jeremiah's prophecies and throwing them into the fire. So in Jeremiah, you've got kings that are good and bad if you ask Jeremiah who's the best king, who's the real king, I think he says Josiah and Jehoiakim and Jehoiakim, and then of course later Zedekiah and Gedaliah are all kind of posers for him. In the prophecies in Jeremiah attacks, for example, some of the things that would have just been naturally secure for the Israelites. For example, the presence of the temple in Jerusalem would have been something that would have been very, very comforting for them. They would have felt like that God was with them as long as that temple was there, as long as their DNA was Israel, things like that. He says in chapter 7, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. Do not trust in these deceptive words. And he highlights their social injustices and systemic inequities as being the demonstration of that they weren't safe. It didn't matter how much religion that they applied. It didn't matter how many religious practices, how deeply they felt about their religious practices, how deeply they felt about their songs and prayers. Their systemic inequities and systemic injustices simply erased any hope of any of that being anything other than traitors kind of talk and traitorous kind of actions. And so he highlights these big things, but he also gives hope. In later prophecies, in chapter 31, he talks about the new covenant that would be written on the hearts of people, not just on stones like the Mosaic covenant was, but on the hearts of people actually. That his spirit would be somehow remarkably in human beings in a similar way that he was in the midst of Israel. This is a very, very remarkable set of hopes and prophecies. Jeremiah, just like Isaiah and Ezekiel, have oracles against the nations, prophecies about foreign nations. This in Jeremiah, it comes toward the end of his book, just right before the fall of Jerusalem, which serves in Jeremiah's book a little bit of a different thing that it did back in Isaiah's book. The oracles against the nations serve to kind of put Israel on notice, Jerusalem on notice rather, that in fact God was still completely sovereign over the other nations, and if they fell, even though it was by a foreign nation sword, it was ultimately God attacking Israel. It was a very, very important thing for them to understand that they didn't understand at the time. Jeremiah is a late 7th century into early 6th century prophet, and so he's pre-exilic all the way up to the exilic prophecy. And so that in fact, Jeremiah is beaten up and drug off to Egypt at the exile, and so at the collapse of Jerusalem. So he's a very important guy. No less important is his book on Lamentations. Lamentations is all about the fall of Jerusalem, and it's a miserable book in some very real ways. It's very disheartening and unfortunate. It's laments about the fall of Jerusalem, the very fact that God was the reason for the fall of Jerusalem, that God turned his own sword on his people, and that even in the midst of this, Jeremiah writes in ways that still convey that he has great hope in the compassion and faithfulness of God, because he understands, unlike Israel, he understands that they are the reason that this happened. Biblical writers go out of their way to try to make it clear that human beings, regardless of their intentions sometimes even, but human beings in acting, particularly those in covenant with God, when they act as if God's not there, then they are seen as traitors and treated as traitors. It would be like a husband flirting with another woman while his wife was standing there. He would be acting as if his wife wasn't there. And any of us that have any vestige of humanity about us would look at that man and say, yeah, what you're doing is completely and utterly inappropriate. And that's a calm way of saying it, isn't it? We would look at them and say, you're a traitor. You're a self-absorbed, self-righteous, self-exalting, self-ingratiating individual. The woman you're talking to is obviously not clever, because if she was, she would know that if this is the way you treat your wife, she will certainly treat you the same way. We would say all of that about the guy, probably. And in the same kind of way, this is sort of the same logic the prophets follow with Judah and Israel. This time, this is Jeremiah. This is, in the 7th century. The northern kingdom of Israel collapses in 722. We're headed towards the big moment of 586 BC when Jerusalem falls, and all these this work. And this is, of course, when Jeremiah is prophesying. He prophesies all the way through the fall of Jerusalem and hopes that at some point in the future that they can come back.